Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching Context. Today, President of Uzbekistan Shavkat Mirziyoyev arrives in Baku on a state visit. According to Uzbekistan's foreign ministry, Uzbekistan aims to implement new joint projects with Azerbaijan, develop business ties and further strengthen their strategic partnership. In recent years, collaboration between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan has deepened in sectors such as energy, transport, agriculture and technology. President Mirziyoyev's visit includes participation in the 17th Summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization, which will be held in Hankendi in Azerbaijan's Karabakh region. The Economic Cooperation Organization, whose members include Central Asian and Turkic countries, promotes economic, technical and cultural cooperation among the member states. The upcoming summit will focus on sustainable development and climate-resilient economic cooperation. That's according to Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Joining us now to unpack all of this and what it could mean for both Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan is political analyst Nikola Mikovic. Thank you for being with us. Now, to start off with, could you talk me through how relations between Baku and Tashkent have developed over recent years?
Last year, the two countries signed the Allied Cooperation Agreement. That's basically the same agreement that Azerbaijan signed with Russia in 2022. Now we see that relations between the two countries deteriorated, but that does not necessarily mean that that will be the case with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan. In reality, I expect them to continue improving their relations and to launch joint projects. We know that Azerbaijan is interested in involving Uzbekistan in the further development of the Middle Corridor. The official name is Trans-Caspian Transportation Corridor. The problem for Uzbekistan is that it does not have the access to the Caspian Sea, which means that part of the route connecting Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan would have to go through Kazakhstan, which is Uzbekistan's economic rival, or through Turkmenistan. Now, I think the two nations, Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan, will try to negotiate that deal to see which would be the best option to develop direct railway, basically, linking two countries.
So as you mentioned, that this visit is happening under the backdrop of strained relations between Azerbaijan and Russia. What impact will that have on this visit?
Well, I don't expect any joint statement condemning Russian actions. I think they will focus on their bilateral relations and on the summit, which is more important here. So Uzbekistan president is coming. Technically, it's a bilateral meeting, but in reality, he will also attend the forum. So I think they will focus on those issues. Although, yes, of course, everything will be in the context of the ongoing tensions between Azerbaijan and Russia. What could happen in the future is more or less the same situation that Russia has now with Azerbaijan. It could have the same situation with Uzbekistan in the near future, because there is also big Uzbek community in Russia, so there could potentially be some problems if Russia does not find a way to resolve it. I think the Kremlin will try to do something to basically to find to settle the situation with Azerbaijan. Although if it continues conducting the so-called special military operation in Ukraine this way, then it will continue losing influence in other former Soviet republics as well, not just in the South Caucasus, but in Central Asia as well.
So you mentioned that broader eco-gathering as well as another of the reasons for Mirziyoyev's visit. What significance do you think those deteriorating Azerbaijan-Russian relations will have there and for that wider regional equation?
So there is no big Russian community living in Uzbekistan. There is a Russian ethnic minority there, but it's not as big as in Kazakhstan, for instance. So I don't expect any consequences for the ethnic Russians living there. But as I said, there could be some problems for ethnic Uzbeks living in Russia. We see reports that Russia is trying to forcefully recruit Central Asian migrants to fight in Ukraine. So if the Kremlin continues doing that, then it's entirely possible that there will be some protests, or that Uzbek foreign ministry could react and try to force Russia basically to stop doing that, or to improve the status that the Uzbeks have in the Russian Federation, which means that Moscow would have to make certain concessions to Uzbekistan, which will be very difficult for Russia to do. But given strong energy ties between Russia and Uzbekistan, I think that the Kremlin will have no choice but to back down. In this case, also, when it comes to Azerbaijan, I expect Russia to back down. It actually did already, because we know that the leader of the Azerbaijani community in Russia was detained, and he was briefly, after that, he was released, which could be interpreted as a concession, because I don't see that any Russians who were arrested in Azerbaijan were released. So Russia made a so-called goodwill gesture. And I think it will have to continue doing that, because otherwise it risks serious confrontation with Azerbaijan. And I don't think Moscow is in a position to afford itself to engage in such a confrontation with
so sticking
its
with that
nominal
broader
ally.
eco summit, what would you say are the goals for the summit this year?
The goals of the summit, I see them basically, I think it's all about the connectivity in the region. It's about transportation connectivity between Central Asia and Europe. And Azerbaijan plays an important role in this process, because all the routes that go through from Europe, from Central Asia to Europe, they have to go through Azerbaijan, which means that Baku can benefit from this summit, and also from the ongoing cooperation between Central Asia and the European Union. So I think that they will discuss the Middle Corridor, which is a crucial project because it connects China with Europe through Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and so on. And it bypasses Russia, which is very important. So Russia is another loser here in this game. But the fact that the Iranian president is coming to Azerbaijan could mean that Tehran is interested in improving relations with Azerbaijan, and also with other neighboring countries, especially after, I would say, defeat that it suffered during the recent
So
war
as you mentioned,
with Israel.
Iran will be at the summit following that 12-day war with Israel. How do you think they're going to be received at the summit?
I think he will be well received, because none of these countries they have any, let's say, problematic issues with the Islamic Republic. And Tajikistan, for instance, is the only Central Asian nation that openly supported Iran, unlike others that decided to take a neutral position. But that does not mean that they sided with Israel. That was not the case. So I don't expect any tensions or any problems. Iran is interested in having a peaceful situation in the South Caucasus, because it also cannot afford to have any problems in its northern part of its country. And Azerbaijan is fully aware of that, in my view, and it will try to basically improve relations with Tehran, although it will continue having good ties with Israel as well. So basically, Baku will try to balance its relations with between Tehran and Israel. I see that happening in the coming weeks and months.
Another thing you touched upon was those connectivity projects, and especially there's digital ones as well, isn't there? So do you think it's fair to say that these projects could shift the geopolitical balance in the region?
Yes, absolutely. I wrote about that many months and years ago, that Turkey aims to crowd Russia out of the South Caucasus. while the European Union and China, the United States to a certain extent as well, is trying to crowd Russia out of Central Asia. So Russia is losing its influence in the post-Soviet space. That's quite obvious. And this summit also confirms that all these former Soviet republics are creating better ties in each other, and also with outsiders, with Pakistan as well, and with Turkey. Yes, that means that Russia is losing its positions in strategically important actually in strategically important regions, South Caucasus and Central Asia. And the leaders of Central Asian countries, not necessarily president, but foreign ministers, they will also participate in the summit, which means that they pay significant attention to good ties, not only with Azerbaijan, but with other players who are involved in this geopolitical game.
Who would you say are the biggest players within ECO?
In the South Caucasus and in Central Asia, I see China, Turkey, the European Union, and the United States, of course, as the biggest players. Although the region was traditionally in Russia's geopolitical orbit, but that's not the case any longer. It still does have some influence in some countries, but as a result of Putin's adventure in Ukraine, many of those countries turned their back on Moscow, and now China is actively increasing its economic presence in Central Asia, while in the South Caucasus, Turkey increased its political, military, and also economic influence.
Do you see China's Belt and Road
Azerbaijan
Initiative coming into play here?
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative is part of this project, although the European Union has its own version of the Belt and Road Initiative. So we have clashes between those two projects, Global Gateway and the Belt and Road Initiative. So as you can see now, China and the EU are competing for influence in Central Asia, and nobody mentions Russia because they don't see Russia as an important actor here any longer, although it does provide security to Central Asian nations. But the fact that Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan last month and a couple of months ago had their military officials had meetings suggests that they also aim to strengthen ties in the military sphere as well. So we see that Russia is just losing its influence in this part of the world, which is strategically important because of its natural resources. So I'm talking about both the Caspian Sea region and Central Asia. Yes, the Belt and Road Initiative is extremely important, and the Middle Corridor is also linked to the Belt and Road Initiative because it connects to China and Europe through Central Asia and the South Caucasus.
And what about the concept of the digital Silk Road? How does that fit into ECO's broader goals for economic cooperation?
Which concept? I'm sorry,
the
I couldn't hear the question.
Silk Road. How will
the digital? Yes. Yeah. In this process, I see that I see the regional countries developing so-called digital connectivity, but they're doing that on a bilateral basis mostly. Although the EU is trying to have a certain influence in that field as well, but I see that as a separate process, basically, because they signed a lot of bilateral agreements in that field. Central Asian nations did that, and that was one of the topics they discussed during the recent Astana Economic Forum that I covered. So that was one of the major issues. So yes, that's also part of the agenda in Central Asia, but also in the South Caucasus, where Azerbaijan is also trying to improve its relations with those countries also through digital sphere and digital connectivity. But again, in my view, it's transportation connectivity that plays a much more important role at this point, at least.
So let's talk more about that, especially in terms of the increasing ties between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan since President Mirziyoyev is in Baku today. What role could these two countries play together in shaping digital infrastructure and transport corridors across Eurasia?
So as I mentioned, there allies nominally, right? Because they signed last year that agreement, and they're both part of the Organization of Turkish States. So they definitely do have good relations, political, and they're trying to improve their economic ties. Now, as I said, the problem is that they don't have the common border, which means that if Uzbekistan wants to transport its goods or to serve as a link connecting China and other Asian countries with Europe and through Azerbaijan, it would have to find a way to deliver its goods to Azerbaijan. But the problem is that two nations do not have the common border, which means that part of a railway will have to go through Kazakhstan, which is Uzbekistan's economic rival, or through Turkmenistan. So they will have to find a way to deal with this issue. But that does not mean that there will be any problems with when it comes to their economic ties. I expect them to continue increasing volume, their trade volume. I'm talking about Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan.
So you mentioned
and also they will...
Sorry, you mentioned that Organization of Turkic States. Can we discuss that a bit more? Because what role do they have to play here?
I think the role that that organization is playing it's basically helping Turkey expand its influence in the post-Soviet space. It already has a strong influence in the South Caucasus, but now it's also focusing on Central Asia, which is, as I said, a strategically important region. Again, it is Russia that's the major loser in this game because the region was traditionally in its sphere of influence. So through this organization, Ankara is expanding its influence, and at the same time, it is trying to get the access to Central Asian natural resources. But there's a very strong competition there. As I mentioned, China is there, the EU is there, openly interested in their natural resources. It's trying to get the access to gas and oil to some extent in Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan is also interested in water resources. So there's a very big competition there. I think Turkey's influence is still rather limited in Central Asia, although that does not mean that it cannot, that Ankara cannot expand it. I think it can. Again, it will be limited because China will always be in a better position because it's due to proximity. Geography plays a very important role in this game. So in my view, the region will be in China's geopolitical orbit, and also the EU will try to get at least the access to some, if not all, natural resources. So that's what they're trying to achieve. In the meantime, Turkey, in my opinion, will try to expand its economic ties with regional states, including Tajikistan, even though it's not a member of the Organization of Turkish States.
So my final question for you, what is your prediction for this Eco Summit? How do you expect the events to unfold?
I expect them to adopt a joint declaration to focus on connectivity. I don't think they will mention the Israel-Iran war or Russian actions, because they will try to adopt a more or less neutral position, which is, in my opinion, good, because they want to at least nominally preserve good ties with all other actors. It will be a good summit from the Azerbaijani perspective, because Baku will manage to increase its importance in the international arena. And that's, in my view, that's one of Baku's major goals here, at least for now.
Great to have your insights there. Thank you for joining us on the programme. Well,
thank you.
That brings this edition of Context to a close. We'll keep bringing you all of the latest developments from President Mirziyoyev's visit and the Eco Summit, which is set to kick off on July the 3rd. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.